Good. Now let's see.
You are allowed to share your screen. So
I cannot at the minute quite see how to select the screen.
At the bottom of Zoom, you will see arrow sign in the middle.
Oh, an arrow. Oh, yes, here we are. Share. I've got it. Okay, share. Seems that the one I want. Oh, just a minute. It's given me the previous copy of the previous talk I had. Right. How do I turn this into a full screen? Wait, now let's go back.
First you share the screen, and then after that I will tell you how to do.
I'm so sorry. Zoom meeting.
if you have any problem, then I can do from here. I can operate because you have already sent the PPT.
Sorry, Luke. I have to take this PowerPoint. I have to put it.
It's actually better if somebody else who has experience in that does that for you. The administrator of the Zoom does that for you, and you just say, next slide, please, next slide, please.
Okay.
Is that a possibility?
Yes, I'll tell them.
Otherwise, they have to explain to you how to do it.
Hello.
Yes.
My good friend who's experienced as this, Alok, says that the best thing is that you take my PowerPoint, you project it on the screen, and I will tell you when to change slides.
Okay, no problem.
It's all right. Good. Can you turn that into full screen?
No.
Good. So I'm talking from Dr. Vishwanath.
Let me start by
MIT World
Dr.
Peace
Hankey.
University. where I am Professor Emeritus of Biology. And today's
Dr.
talk
Hankey, are you listening?
Is going to be about
Hello.
the life force known in Ayurveda, which your institute specializes
Dr. Hankey,
in.
Dr. Hankey.
AYUS. So please look at the next slide. Next slide, please.
Dr. Hankey, let Alok start the program, and then you can start.
Alok, can you move to the next slide?
Dr. Hankey, it's privilege for us to have you here. So
Okay,
I will give you a brief introduction that who are you for the new persons who are not associated with you. So namaste everyone. We are here for monthly KSAS talk, and today we have Professor Alex Hankey, who has obtained a first in natural science at University of Cambridge and a PhD in theoretical physics from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. After holding a Lindemann Postdoctoral Fellowship at Stanford, he joined Maharishi International University as an assistant professor of physics in 1973. There, he received instructions to work out the relationship between the Western science and the Vedic science, a project that continues up the present time. He also learned the Vedic science directly from the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, which is the best thing we are seeing this generation in Upanishad-style. His next 30 years were spent working for the Maharishi organization in many countries and many ways, such as organizing meetings in UK House of Parliament. He originated the perspective of science and philosophy of consciousness using critical phenomena in stability concept from his PhD, the explanatory power of which is unique in several fields. He has published more than 130 articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals and several books chapters. He is on the Stanford 2% list of the top academics and the editorial board of the many scientific journals in traditional, complementary, and integrative medicines. So we, on behalf of INADS and KSAS, welcome you, Professor Hankey. And today's topic is AYUS, the life force and its biophysics. So over to you.
Good. Thank you very much, Professor Raj. A very kind introduction. Can we go to the first slide, please? So this talk is about a concept which is absolutely fundamental to Ayurveda, AYUS, the root for Ayurveda. And AYUS means the life strength and the life span, and it's usually translated for convenience as the life force, because that actually relates to many other systems of medicine. So this talk about the life force is divided into 4 sections with a sort of envoi, as we call it, at the end. The first section is the background with 2 subsections. Then I'll talk about the methods we've used in order to produce a modern scientific picture, model, mathematical physics model of the life force. Then I'll talk about the results that come from that methods, again in 2 sections, something technical, critical point fluctuations, and how it results in the missing scientific theory of the life force. Then, as is normal in scientific papers and scientific publications, a discussion firstly on epigenetics and the regulation of gene activity and how this is critical. The new model of the life force, that should actually be the 4th of these, cell-functioning, now holistic in biology, and the optimized enzyme-facilitated biochemical reactions, which now constitute our understanding of life, greatly in contrast to most modern biology, which needs updating. And finally, this little envoi of the sandwich model of biology, which is the key to understanding everything in a more holistic picture. So let's move on to the next slide, which is the background. Two parts of the background. I shall talk about them in several slides each. The recognition of the life force by traditional systems of medicine, particularly Ayurveda and the AYUS systems, and then the failure, a regrettable failure of modern science, Western science, to recognize the life force and how they went against it. So next slide, thank you. The recognition by traditional systems of medicine. The ancient systems of biology and medicine, of which I'm sure you can all name many, there is, for example, Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Swarigpa, and homeopathy, all within the AYUS systems of medicine. And these ancient systems of biology and medicine, particularly the Indian ones, recognized the concept of the life force very strongly in ancient times, and they applied it to animals because they recognized that elephants, for which they wrote Gajja Ayurveda, and horses, for which they wrote Hasta Ayurveda, and cows, for which they wrote Gau Ayurveda, and all animals like dogs and lions and tigers and snakes all had a life force. And the plants they used, many of the remedies are meant to preserve the quality of the life force and to transmit it through the aushadhi, through the herbal medicines which they created. They're meant to transfer life force directly or indirectly, if you like, from the plant to the patient. And then there are fungi, and of course, the fungi go down even to yeasts and things like Saccharomyces, which you may have had to grow in your laboratory. And all these things, from whole organisms down to single cells, they all have an active life force, and the life force coordinates all the activity of the organism. And if you remove the life force, the organism drops dead. A very famous example of that is when the human soul departs. There was the famous example of the man who ran the first marathon. And the marathon was run after the Battle of Marathon in Greek ancient history. And the runner for the Greek army, when they'd won the battle, ran 42.5 kilometers, or whatever it is in miles, down to Athens. But being from Sparta, the rival city, he then had to run the entire distance to Sparta, which was almost another 120 miles. And when he gets to the gate of Sparta, the gate is opened to him, and he says, "We won." And he drops dead. Now you can imagine that he was running, as it were, as one would say about a car, he was running on empty, and he kept going because he had incredible courage and persistence. He was a Spartan and used to living in what we call Spartan conditions. And he would have dropped dead if it had been 5 kilometers less. And one can be quite sure that he would have reached the gate if it had been another kilometer or two further. So here is an example how the human soul actually contains the life force, and the person whose life force departs with the soul, the body can't function. There's some tremendous organizing power, which I will try and explain to you later in the lecture. There is some tremendous organizing power which keeps the organism alive. So Ayurveda, we're down on about the fourth line, calls it AYUS, and Ayurveda is named after it because it's the synthesis of the two words, AYUS plus Veda, and the sandhi between AYUS and Veda converts the S to an R, so you get Ayurveda. Ayurveda is technically the science, Vedic science of AYUS, the life force and what brings one health and length of life. Traditional Chinese medicine calls it qi, and being Chinese, they had a slightly different way of looking at it, and they considered everything as a polarity between what is active and what is receptive, active being yang and yin, receptive being yin, rather like the polarity between Surya and Chandra in Vedic sciences. And you have yin qi and yang qi. The receptive, should we say, the part which corresponds to the Shakti, and this is rather like Purusha and Prakriti, the male and the female. And they applied these two concepts to all life forms and to every aspect of our universe. Next slide, please, Alok. So the Irish systems of medicine all recognize the life force. In yoga, it really takes the form of prana, which one can, I generally loosely translate prana in this context as life breath. And when one performs sukha pranayama, or preferably anulom vilom pranayama, we actually strengthen the life breath slowly, not too fast, and that strengthens our health. So pranayama is a very good way of directly improving health by strengthening the life force. And naturopathy takes the European name, vis vitalis, vis being the word for force in in Latin, and vitalis meaning of vitality, of life. So I put it down translated there as force of life. And the term vis vitalis comes from ancient European medicine. There were famous doctors. Hippocrates, of course, was Greek, and we look back to Hippocrates for the caduceus and for the symbol of life in a much more spiritual way. And then there were famous Roman doctors and others. And the practice of medicine was, the teaching medicine was centered on Padua in Italy. And they taught very seriously about the life force. Homeopathy uses the same term. And homeopathy has a very, very interesting way of strengthening the life force, because each ultra-diluted homeopathic medicine can be shown, but using the theory I have, to strengthen a particular aspect of the life force. And I might answer a question on that if you have any later. So traditional systems of medicine all agree. A strong life force equates with health. A weak life force means there is susceptibility to disease. And as you will recognize, this is exactly the way Ayurveda describes the balance of the doshas and the balance of each of the individual saptadhatus, the rather poorly translated as 7 tissues. So we are in total agreement among the ancient systems of medicine on the existence of the life force. The agreement between the systems is very impressive because they developed independently in different regions of the world, and there was little or no intercommunication between them. Next slide, please, Alec. So Western science, just to show you how appallingly Western scientists behave, Western science uses the, quote, scientific approach to understand biology. And it looks at biochemical pathways and it analyzes the biochemistry to construct a theory of life. And it notes that they are biochemical reactions facilitated by enzymes, catalyzed by enzymes, each of which is designed to catalyze a specific enzymatic reaction. And biological scientists realized that this structure cannot possibly describe a life force. So in the 1930s, when this picture of life, before the molecular biology was worked out with DNA and RNA, they realized that this couldn't possibly support a life force. So they said, oh, it's just an ancient superstition. It's unscientific. And the idea was banished from science. And one or two visionary scientists hugely protested and regretted it, but there was nothing they could do against the weight of rather conservative and unimaginative scientists who imagined that they had actually got to the key of life and they understood almost everything. And even in the 1950s, I think it was 53, when the Watson-Crick published their theory of the structure of DNA, and they could see how DNA could reproduce itself and maintain that structure by splitting in two. And they produced the molecular biology, which became a theory of biology, which I call the molecular biology theory of biology, was based on the structures of deoxyribonucleic acid and RNA, ribonucleic acid, and it offered no further grounds to change any opinion of the life force. So the life force remained in a condition that one could call opprobrium, people looking down on it and having very bad opinions of it. So for a century, well, because this all started prior to the 1930s, and 1925 isn't that much short of 2025 isn't that much short of a century from 1930. For a century, scientific biology had no reason, it thought, to change its opinion. In fact, the reasons to change the opinion was discovered over about at least 40 years ago, and books about it were written in the 1980s. Next slide, please. So the failure to recognize the life force has continued because biology had not yet incorporated major new advances in biology. There's one series of advances which comes under the name hormesis, which is organism reaction to the presence of toxins. And they compensate with feedback loops, which I shall show you later. And fractal physiology, which is a way of an organism optimizing its response to a particular stimulus from the outside. And these two concepts, we've shown recently, we've written a paper showing that these two form a biology of adaptation. Now, the molecular biologists and the academic biologists think of the functions of an organism and how it has to metabolize food from the environment and get food in and out of the cell and so on, and how it reproduces and how it undergoes mitosis or, in certain circumstances, meiosis. But they simply haven't recognized that adaptation is as fundamental as molecular biology, because in the wild, in the big bad world outside, organisms have to adapt to conditions. An organism that can't adapt can't survive. So, in fact, adaptation biology, which is a synthesis of hormesis and fractal physiology, is as fundamental to understanding life as molecular biology, to do with how organisms produce their proteins and how they reproduce. So the hormesis and fractal physiology balance the genetics of molecular biology with a new epigenetics, and a fractal physiology effectively optimizes epigenetics. And it's there because if an organism optimizes a process, it's more successful than organisms that don't. So very early in life, literally within 200 or 300 million years, all single cells, even the most primitive, known as the archaea, they all had adopted fractal physiology. And I think I described this idea previously when I talked in February, I think it was, at Kuru Institute. So combining genetics and epigenetics results in a new sandwich model of biology, which I'll show you later, and it incorporates properties implied by fractal physiology and critical instabilities from the heart of the physics of phase transitions. And that changes. Fractal physiology has long been known to result from an idea called self-organized criticality, and that was originally connected into the physics of critical instabilities in the theory of phase transitions and critical phenomena. So self-organized criticality, which I've then written as S_o_C, the critical instabilities from that optimize epigenetic switching processes, which I presented previously, I think, to your group and your college and the institute. And their presence completely changes the essential biophysics of life. It's utterly transformed. And because of critical point fluctuations, as they're called, it revolutionizes our understanding of life from a biophysical perspective. And we then see that we get a theory of the life force, and we can understand how Phidippides' body dropped dead because the life force departed when he had delivered his message to the gates of Sparta. So critical point fluctuations couple all the way up and down the biochemical pathways through hormesis, and this, as we shall see as the talk progresses, yields a missing theory of AYUS, the life force. Hormesis means a response to toxic molecules, toxin molecules, and a toxin molecule poisons an enzyme, but it leads through feedback loops to more of the toxified, poisoned enzyme being made in the cell. And the synthesis of this compensates for the reduced enzyme activity, and sometimes it even overcompensates. So the addition of a small amount of toxin actually increases the activity of the enzyme in the cell, which has replaced the toxified enzyme and produced a little extra as well. And this is a very remarkable property of life, and it's absolutely at the heart of the biology of adaptation. So next, please, let's move. I think we move on to the, results. The critical point fluctuations couple via hormesis, and it means that critical point fluctuations from all critical instabilities couple. And the coupling of critical points produces what a term that we coined during my PhD thesis, a critical point of higher order, or sometimes called a higher order critical point, HOCP if you prefer it. And they couple these critical points optimizing the function of processes. They couple along the biochemical pathways. Now, as you all will have seen from studying these wonderful diagrams of biochemical pathways in particular kinds of cell, particular kinds of organism, you have thousands of biochemical reactions. And they're all optimized, and the optimizing processes couple through the critical instabilities, and the coupling of them creates an absolutely massive, what's called negative entropy, organizing power. Entropy is disorder, negative entropy is order, and when it takes on a dynamic form like this, which it does in the life of living organisms, you couple together the organizing power, keeping each biochemical reaction optimized, and several thousand of these couple from the different enzymes, and this creates critical points of that same order as not just 2 or 3 or 4, which we talked about 50 years ago, but several thousand, very, very ultra high order. So let's move on to the next section. Oh, we aren't there yet. Now, hormesis means all connected biochemical reactions get coupled together. Several thousand of them, as I said, creating critical points of that order, critical points of ultra high order, and the range of the critical fluctuations at the top of the page, critical point fluctuations, their range extends from molecular sizes, maybe 10 molecules, 20 molecules, all the way up to the structure of a whole cell, which one could call mesoscopic sizes. So you get critical coherence within life of a mesoscopic size, and possibly within organisms like ourselves, large plants and animals get critical coherence of the size of the organism itself, which is seen in the aura and other things which are measured through rather remarkable modern instruments. So we get critical coherence, the size of the organism, and as we shall see later, it possesses all the properties of the life force, which I did mention towards the beginning. Next. the critical instabilities make possible a new theory of the life force. I thought I'd better say this once again because it's the entire, basically, it's the fundamental message of this talk, this lecture. With all the necessary and declared properties, desired properties, when the life force is strong, the up and down tendencies are at critical points, it means health. And when it becomes weak and the up and down properties depart somewhat from the critical instabilities, then there is susceptibility to disease. And if you're in bad luck or bad habits, the organism becomes ill and you fall ill to a particular pathology, a particular disease. Next. Okay, so this is the discussion. And as I said at the beginning, the discussion has 4 subsections, and for some reason that first slide has got eliminated by mistake. So the discussion, first, epigenetics and the up and down regulation of gene activity. I have said rather more than I had realized about this in the results section, but the thing is that biologists tend to assume that genes are only switched on or off, and it's a complete phase transition. But when you look at the theory of phase transitions, having something which is either on or off and goes discontinuously from one to another, it suffers from awful blocking procedures. In reality, the regulation of gene expression is continuous, and the regulation goes up and increases the expression of the gene, or it comes down and it reduces the expression of the gene. And as I said in hormesis, if the activity of the gene is reduced by a toxin, then the regulation goes up, and enough enzyme, if not more, is produced to compensate for that. So cells can closely match enzyme production with needs. And that's very important, because when you match the enzyme production with the needs, you don't unnecessarily waste energy in the cell, and you don't waste resources. And optimizing in this way is clearly of great advantage to cellular function. So such regulation is optimized by self-organized criticality, which is part of the fractal physiology. So next slide, please. So, as I said a little bit earlier, the critical coherence, which applies to the critical point, is generated by the critical point instabilities regulating and optimizing the regulation of each biochemical reaction. The range of the critical coherence is expanded by the coupling of the critical coherence as a form of life force between the different reactions, and it expands to encompass the size of whole cells, because all over the cell there are various kinds and different biochemical reactions going on. Even the the reactions going on in the cell nucleus and nucleolus in eukaryotic cells is the subject to this kind of critical coherence. And cell functioning is now seen through the interweaving of the various kinds of critical coherence. Cell functioning becomes holistic. It actually spans the whole cell, and it takes on a field-like form, which enables it to be labeled holistic. And this agrees with the thinking of traditional systems of medicine. And all those traditional systems, AYUS, Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, Swarigpa, and homeopathy and Chinese medicine, they would all say that the functioning of of organisms, and those that recognize cells, the probably paramanus in Ayurveda, they recognize that they are being holistically controlled by the life force. So this agrees with the thinking of all traditional systems of medicine. It disagrees with the reductionist thinking of modern science, and we must understand that holism and reductionism, which is to reduce everything to its parts, to its little molecules, the reductionism of modern science, which was the axiomatic way it began and is still considered the essence of modern science by many people, that reductionism turns out not to apply to cells once you realize that they are controlled by the life force. There's a much more integrated and beautiful relationship between the whole and the parts. And one of the ways of describing it is to use a beautiful principle which says the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and it's these coherent relationships between the different parts which gives rise to this holistic principle. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and when it's dynamically structured by the life force, you have an organism where holism truly applies. Next. So I thought I would show you this picture of the life force, which we published in the paper in Journal of Ayurveda Integrative Medicine in 2023 in a special issue, and you can download it free. So you just look up Hankey and Kale, K-L-E, my co-author, Associate Dean, and we produced this little picture. The reductionist approach is limited to the genetic makeup. It fails to understand health and disease because it proposes that genetics are responsible for all disease. It sees genetic changes as irreversible. So non-communicable diseases are considered chronic and incurable. And it fails to include epigenetic responses to environmental changes. Whereas Ayurveda, as you all know, produces dinacharya at the heart of its principles of disease management and health management. And it says that when the environment changes and a day switches to night, you should jolly well go to bed early instead of sitting up and watching TV and playing with your games on your mobile all evening and after midnight, no doubt. And the complexity-based approach on the right, which includes fractal physiology, sees optimized epigenetic responsiveness as the key. So health is transformed to disease because of pure poor, bad responses by the organism. Epigenetic changes, however, are reversible. So non-communicable diseases become curable in principle. And people who are wise enough, should I say, wise enough to take treatments from Ayurvedic doctors, which include this kind of thing, which principle, which most modern doctors know nothing about, and modern hospitals are absolutely dreadful at giving people adequate sleep if they're in a large ward. You find that these things are not understood by modern medicine. So you have this level of cells, tissues, organs, and then organ system and organism, which are underlain by the biochemical pathways in each cell, which on the left side, modern biology, by and large, still thinks that this is reductionist and you can reduce it all to molecules. And the fractal physiology approach, the a new approach with a new model of biology, regards it as holistic, but they all use the biochemical pathways, which they treat in different terms, because the old approach doesn't worry about the regulation and the hormesis, and the new approach worries about concerns itself with the hormesis. And then you have the central dogma of life is common to both, that you have the DNA producing the RNA and then the proteins, which you see on both sides. Next slide, please. So you have this dichotomy produced by the difference between modern science and modern understanding, which includes the life force. Modern science recognizes that life uses enzyme-facilitated biochemical reactions, but it says it's only enzyme-facilitated biochemical reactions. But in fact, what is really true is that those enzyme-facilitated biochemical reactions are optimized, and they are optimized by the processes involved in fractal physiology combined with feedback loops from hormesis. And the optimization results from optimizing response processes, and it requires to optimize properly. And I wish I'd got a slide to show you this carefully. The optimization requires the critical instabilities, and the critical instabilities produce system-wide critical coherence, and hence you get fractal physiology producing the optimization. And everything in this theory therefore fits together, and it's all self-consistent. Next, Alec. So the mesoscopic critical point coherence is strong when all the up and down regulations are centered on critical points and are being subject to critical fluctuations. They will fluctuate up and down, but the center of the fluctuations is definitely at the critical point. And when the fluctuations, when the regulation departs from the criticality and the critical points, it makes the up and down fluctuations weak. And this means that the optimized regulation corresponds to health, and the compromised regulation means that there is susceptibility to disease. And this means that you can talk about good regulation, good quality regulation, poor quality regulation, and in that sense, also optimal regulation. And when I realized this 10 years ago, I spoke about it to one of India's most famous doctors, Professor B.M. Hegde, the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Manipal. And he immediately asked me to submit a paper to his private journal, the Journal of Scientific Healing Opportunities. And he published it in 2019, and there was a follow-up paper in 2015. There was a follow-up paper in 2019, and a later paper, I think, published in 2023. But we start from to arrive at the definition of health. I first did this in about 2011 after giving a talk at the Sharada Institute in Mumbai. I had recalled that when you look at yoga and Ayurveda, with which I was very familiar, the poor quality health originated apparently in poor quality regulation as understood by both those systems. So I said to them, poor regulation is poor health. Poor quality regulation, if you like, corresponds to poor quality health. Now, it then follows that if you can improve regulation, improve the quality of regulation, you improve health. So you get this second line of my health mantra. And the third line says that optimal regulation is optimal health, if you improve it as much as you possibly can. And of course, if you want to understand what health means, you obviously mean its optimal quality. So optimal regulation equals health. And this gives you rather a neat way of understanding health and susceptibility to disease, poor quality regulation, from a very nice qualitative viewpoint. But the point here is what I didn't know in 2015 is that this can be given an underlying, highly sophisticated biophysical theory in terms of a model of the life force which agrees with what Ayurveda and the other systems have been telling us. So optimal regulation is health, and that agrees with Ayurveda and the life force. So next, please. I'm providing on the next slide a comparison taken from the 2023 volume of Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, JIIM, volume 14, and that page is a putative page because they don't actually publish a hard copy of the journal. It's an online page number, 100, I think that says 831. And this compares modern medicine against the AYUS systems of medicine. And modern medicine comes it includes the central dogma of molecular biology. There is no significant definition of health apart from that at the World Health Organization. And then there is, it's reductive. But when you look at all the other systems I've put down, Ayurveda, yoga therapy, naturopathy, Unani, Siddha medicine, Sorikpa from Tibet, homeopathy, and then finally integrative medicine, which is meant to integrate modern biomedicine with the Irish systems of medicine, you find that they all consider the structure of living organisms to have a dynamically maintained holistic quality. And the moral of this particular slide is that the life force is absolutely key to understanding this rigorously, and it shows that modern biology is in error and needs to be reformed urgently. And all these traditional systems which were dismissed by people on the Royal Society and the New England Journal of Medicine as just being funny old bits of superstition are actually right. They've got it right. They can cure chronic diseases, and modern medicine is not able to cure NCDs. It can palliate them, but very seldom does it actually cure them. It does occasionally. So next slide. So this is a diagram of the sandwich model of biology, which in India I like to call the Vada Power, which is a good local example of a sandwich, the Vada Power model of biology. And the context for understanding it is that you have the biochemical pathways catalyzed by enzymes, as indeed we've known since the 1800s, and really worked out in much more detail by the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and continuing to understand that in more and more detail. And it's supported by the conventional molecular biology and the genetics and the DNA and the RNA and the synthesis of the protein enzymes, which is conventional molecular biology. And what the biologists have forgotten is that if you want to have adaptability, you need a biology of adaptation. And that's all controlled by the epigenetics, which have at their heart hormesis and fractal physiology. And these actually produce feedback loops, and they tell specific enzymes in the genetics that they need to get a move on and produce more of a particular enzyme. So those two funny arrows going down indicate their feedback loops from the analysis of the activity on the biochemical pathways, which produce epigenetic stimulation of the production of genes, and that gets optimized, and you get the life force coming out of it. So I think we must be, I think, very nearly at the end. I've taken nearly an hour of your time, for which I apologize. Next slide, please. So what conclusions should we make? Students of Ayurveda should take the concept of AYUS very seriously. Don't doubt it because of what modern scientists erroneously say. It's absolutely at the heart of life and living organisms, and the ability of living organisms to adapt, to survive in difficult conditions, to not get ill, to remain healthy and viable. So AYUS is not just important for organisms you think about, it's extremely important for ourselves, and to maintain the quality of our own AYUS by obeying the laws of dinacharya and other things. Ayurveda fundamental concepts, Ayurveda Padatta, have profound, and I cannot emphasize this seriously enough, they have profound scientific validity. Don't listen to what your medical doctors may have to say, that they're absolutely incomprehensible. When you've worked it out, they have profound, deep, wonderful scientific validity and implications for our whole understanding of biology. Ayurveda's picture of living organisms as holistic, and I should say Ayush's picture of organisms as holistic, is correct. The holism is created by critical point coherence in the epigenetics. And if you can take home those points and fill them out a bit with the other things, that's great. So this is my guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded Maharishi Ayurveda. And as it says in the Guru Gita, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah, Jai Guru Deva. Next and final slide. Thank you for listening, explaining AYUS, the life force, in terms of modern science. Thank you. God bless you all. So I'm very happy to take questions if anyone is still alive and listening. Professor Kumar.
Thank you, Dr. Hankey, and we will take the comments and the questions. So Dr. Kumar is the first one who is going to ask you something.
Okay. So I have a few questions, Dr. Hankey, and I start with first questions. So what at organ level, what are the component of self-organized criticality?
The question was what at the organ level are the points of criticality. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
You see, you have criticality, all right? So we have to understand the meaning of the word criticality. And then we have to understand how it gets self-organized. Now, criticality is the property of a system which is located at a critical instability. So the words criticality and critical instability are just very simply related. And I think that's a lovely question because I should have explained that in my talk. So criticality is the property of a system which is maintaining itself at a critical point. And it has critical point fluctuations, and these generate the term I used, critical coherence. Now, how could the criticality be self-organized? Now, this is really quite tricky because there isn't apparently anything outside the cell which is self-organizing, which is organizing the cell. And this means that a cell has to organize most of its functions by itself. And there are many classic examples of this. And there were two very famous South American biologists who first talked about the capacity of organisms for self-organization. And the name of one of them was Uberto Maturana. And he had a famous student whose name is not coming to me at the minute. It will come back in a moment. Maturana and I can't get it. Anyway, they said that everything has to be self-organized. And when we come to these critical points, I've discussed this in depth with another PhD student of my own PhD supervisor who ended up at the as Professor of Mathematical Physics at Imperial College London, which is not a bad position to attain. And he said that if you were to have this self-organized, you would have to have several critical points together. That might conceivably cause it. So when you get the coalescing of the critical points, automatically, as the cells start to function and to grow and to evolve, the self-organization is a matter of resisting thermal fluctuations, the disorganizing effect of heat, because you are in a position of sufficient negative entropy. So you have, I referred to the negative entropy of the life force, keeping the system organized. And the strength of that life force in terms of organizing power, in terms of a local negative entropy, which again one can explain, but it requires rather a deep a sequence of diagrams. That deep organizing power self-organizes the critical points to maintain the structure of the life force. Or that is to be really honest, I should say that is my current hypothesis of how it works. I haven't found any reason to disbelieve it, but I haven't found any way to actually prove it in depth yet. It would be a very interesting PhD program.
Okay, so in addition to this, that self-organized criticality is not only at the cellular level. It should be molecular level or beyond that, because only cellular level self-criticality won't organize or self-organized.
Yes, this is why I did mention, did I or did I not mention that organisms have several levels of their organization? You can start from the top because organisms are holistic. You have the whole organism, you have organ systems, organs within the organ systems, tissues, which translate loosely into dhatus, saptadhatus, and ojas. And then you go down to the cellular level, and you have these 5 levels of organization, to all of which self-organized criticality can apply in own specific ways. And I rather believe that when you want to understand Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and these are explained in corresponding terms in different organs when you read the Ayurvedic texts, these understandings of Vata, Pitta, Kapha actually include the negative entropy, organizing power of the critical coherence, and therefore there has to be self-organized criticality going on at a corresponding level in the organs. Now, all I've said now is that it has to be there. Otherwise, those things won't function as efficiently as they are needed to. But I haven't actually answered your question, which is how is it within an individual organism, organ, that you get? And I will think about that, and we ought to see if we can solve that problem. It's a very good question.
Okay, now next question is that since my PhD days, I was discussing with Dr. Singh also about this, and the central dogma. So I was not very convinced that the central dogma is really the central dogma. Now, your sandwich model of biology, do you think, I saw that picture of sandwich model of biology, and where you bring the epigenetics into picture in these pictures, do you think that the central dogma is need to be changed, or maybe it need to be revised? Because the genes are...
That's a lovely question. That's a truly lovely question. You see, looking at it, quote, reductionistically, you clearly have those processes of translation, transcription of the DNA into the RNA. It has to be going on, but it gets regulated. And how much you say that that regulation of the transcription process is somehow turning it into a different kind of transcription process, that's definitely a point for debate. Okay? But there is what we call transcription going on, because there has to be. And you're transcribing more of the gene once you've implemented the fractal physiology and you've asked for more of a particular gene to be produced. But it's now subject to fluctuations. It's not happening at a steady rate, but that is going up and down according to the needs of the cell. And so from a purely static, rather reductionist picture, the genetics and the transcription translation processes remain the same. But in point of fact, they don't, because the rates are changing according to the needs of the cell and the optimization according to the epigenetics of the hormesis and the fractal physiology.
Okay. And the last question is that about the hormesis, also process of hormesis. So I don't think body recognize something as a toxin or any molecule as a toxin. It's the concentration of the molecule which makes it toxic for the cells. So how in your system body recognize something which is a toxic?
Oh, you see, when you and I are functioning, we go out and we see an angry dog. And we look at it and we say, that's dangerous. We must walk away. All right? Now, it's also true of bacteria in the bloodstream. You can take pictures of them and you can see them trying to flee away from the white blood cells, the lymphocytes, which are chasing them and trying to devour them to get rid of them. Okay? So even on the cellular level, there's something comparable to me looking at an angry dog and saying, got to get out of here.
Yeah, but they need
no,
a
no, I'm coming to the point, okay? When you get a toxin molecule, we know that cells will gravitate, what's the name? Cellular motion towards food. You would know the technical name for that, and I do too, somewhere in my subconscious. But when a cell encounters a toxin, the molecules get into the cell, and the cell doesn't keep them out, but the enzymes stop functioning so well, and the decrease in the level of the rate of the production of the molecules by that enzyme decreases, it goes down, and the cell is equipped to recognize that the concentration of that enzyme product has gone down, and it compensates for the decrease in the amount of enzyme product by producing more enzyme. There's not some little brain sitting in the nucleus saying, "Oh God, there's a toxin around. We've got to."
The cells will not recognize the word toxin. They will
absolutely.
They will take all the molecule, but the critical concentration is needed for nucleus to tell them that you need to produce more enzyme, right?
Yes, so there is a feedback mechanism which turns on. You realize that the structure of genes is that they can be made available to transcribe or not available to transcribe. And there are all sorts of intermediate molecules like this funny sRNA, which also causes interference in the production of particular enzymes. And we don't know how it works in detail, but one of the ways that it definitely works is that the presence of the toxin, which reduces the rate of production of the next biochemical down the pathway, the reduction of that biochemical triggers more production of the enzyme. And that's a feedback loop which sounds incredibly complicated. But the oldest cells on Earth, who included were mostly archaea, and then there were one or two there were things like the blue-green algae which got going rather, which are prokaryote rather than archaea. And these cells, they all have the ability to compensate for the presence of toxins. Unless it was okay.
Thank you very much. Next.
You want to ask a question?
I just want to mention something that's
yes.
Hello, Mike. This is Luke. I'm sitting to Alex's left. There is a very relevant paper which you may be interested in. I'll describe the name so you can find it. It's called Memory-Induced Long-Range Order in Dynamical Systems by Sipling, Zhang, and Deventra. It's on archivist 2405-06834.
We will transmit the details by email to you at the end of the...
And it goes into some technical mathematical detail on how critical instabilities involved in memory recall in a neural structure can induce long-range coherence, which aids and assists with the recall of the memory across a distributed system of a neural network. So it doesn't just occur in the criticality, multi-order criticalities. It does not just occur inside individual cells. You're absolutely right. It occurs at multiple levels of biology in a sort of a structured fractal fashion. So
brilliant, beautiful.
I thought you might appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, very good. Thank you, Randy.
That actually forms a very important component that Luke has been working on, which is how to understand the elementary information processing conducted by a consciousness in the brain. Good. Professor Raj, do any of the students want to ask a question?
Yeah, Alok, please.
Yeah. Is there anyone who want to ask to Dr. Hankey?
Yes, sir. Professor Radheshyam.
I think he is not going to ask anything. So we have Professor Singh here with us. So, sir, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So I would like to invite you, sir, for a brief comment on Professor Hankey's talk.
Well, that's a long long task to do. He has covered so many things, but fundamentally, even though this is a question that we need to understand how far we can take science in explaining something like Ayurveda. Ayurveda does not in especially when he talks about his guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he did not do any science. He just had these ideas. There is a concept of continuity versus discreteness. So everything that we talk in science has the concept of discreteness, whether you're talking about interaction between cells, molecules, human beings, whatever. But when you go to a level of somebody like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi or Vedas, Vedic knowledge, and where the Ayurveda comes from, is continuity. So that is a challenge that is for all of us, especially people like Professor Alex Hankey, who has been in this business on both sides of it for so long. So it will be fantastic, especially I think when he talked about somebody, PhD students, whatever he's trying to do. I mean, many PhDs will have to come forward to do this and perhaps address this idea to the extent where we can say, well, discreteness, mathematics, and physics, particles, no matter how small those particles are, the waves, the vibrations, they all are coming from somewhere else. And where the integration will be more important. The theory will be very different, not just what we can understand, because our mind reads, understands consciousness, even consciousness reads minds, reads things in such a way that there is a counting. You count, but when you really, does your body really count, or is only we count? We impose on the body to say the body really counts and interacts and assimilates. So those things are beautifully highlighted here on one side of it. The other side needs to be worked on. It was wonderful to see, and I think Ayurveda is, the concepts of Ayurveda should be guiding science, not the other way around. That's what I hope, that someday we will get there. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Professor Raj. You're very generous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice.
Professor Raj is getting thanks for everybody. Whosoever, doesn't matter who says what. Alex has one name in his mind. Professor Raj is the one who is doing everything. So even though there was some, when Alok was giving introduction, he said, Alex said, well, Professor Raj, thank you very much for introducing me. So he got one name ingrained in his head. That means, Raj, you got a lot of responsibility now.
Professor Hankey, this comment was by Professor Balram Singh, sir, the president of INADS.
That's okay. That's okay.
He was giving connect.
Oh, I should have put my. I should have put my.
Yeah, now he will recognize.
Okay, that's all right.
Hi, Balram. How are you?
I was the one who was speaking.
Oh, right.
So-
I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Good. Raj is the one who is really guiding us too, so it's okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So
Namaskar.
thank you, Dr. Hankey, for giving this beautiful speech on very encouraging topic today. And you are very special for us, for those who believe in meditation, who believe in transcendental meditation, who believe in yogic and guru parampara, because you are the direct disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. So it's our privilege to have you here and associated with INADS and KSAS. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.